Mafia, and today we're going to be talking to you about the shoes that we're most excited to come out for 2025. Evan's done a lot of research on this, and DJ and I are going to be chiming in with some of our opinions based on the shoes that we've had in the past. Let's kick it off, Evan.
All right, so the first shoe on the agenda for today is going to be the newest edition of the New Balance Rebel series. This is going to be the 5th edition of the shoe. So I'm going to hand this off initially to DJ to give a brief history of his kind of time with the shoe and what he's thinking about what could be in store for this next generation.
Yeah, sure. So originally, I never tried the original version of this, but the V2 was a light, faster daily trainer. If you wanted to throw something on that would let you spin the legs a little more, go a little up tempo. That was a great shoe to reach for. Over time, they've made this shoe a bit bulkier, more like a real daily trainer. Here I have the V4. This is one of my favorite daily trainers of all time. This thing is awesome. It does everything that I need it to do. I wore it for a workout, for a long run, daily training as well. For this, it looks like it's starting to get the 1080 treatment. And if they're going to be making it a little bulkier, it will take away from what the shoe is right now. I think they found a great balance with it. You can still take it for that workout. They don't need to make it any bigger than what it is right now. So I will be going, in this case, B for bulky. Hopefully they keep it the same weight that it is right now.
Yeah, I kind of am echoing DJ's sentiments, and I've had the V2, and right now I have the V3. I really like how the shoe is very soft without having a lot of stack height under it. I think it's good to have a lot of versatility in your lineup in terms of some shoes that are maybe a higher stack and then some that are a lower stack. So it looks like this shoe is a lot thicker than the previous generations, which makes me want to stick it in the B tier as well. I think that a lot of the shoe companies are moving towards making a lot of shoes max cushion, which I really like the max cushion shoes, but I also think it's good to keep your lineup very versatile. And I would like to see a softer, lower stack shoe stay in the New Balance rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I'm not the hugest fan of the V4 edition of the shoe. I actually preferred the V3. It appears to, as DJ and Lakeland both mentioned, kind of be continuing on the trend of increasing stack heights. So, frankly, I'm not quite sure where I would place this shoe in the context of a rotation that already contains something with a little bit more cushion that ends up coming in at a similar weight. Like, for example, the new Nova Blast 5 or the old Nova Blast 4, where you get a considerably higher amount of stack height. Although all shoes are, slightly in excess of 250 grams in this case. So there's not too big of a weight difference. I personally don't prefer the Rebel series as much as something like the Nova Blast. So for me, I would put this in C. And if you take the aggregate of all of our votes, we're going to put this as kind of like a low B tier. So now we're going to be moving on to our second shoe. This is the Glycerin 22. And this is using the new DNA tuned foam that is present within the new Glycerin Max, and DJ has some experience running in that shoe. So DJ, you want to kick us off with what we might expect from this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the Glycerin Max, I've had the opportunity to run in it a few times, maybe once or twice. So not as many as I'd like, but I mean, first of all, it looks awesome, and it rolls, and that's kind of what you want from a shoe like this. And the foam, credit to it, it lets you roll, despite the size of it. And I think, Evan, you and I were talking about at some point how it would be awesome to see this new foam put into a shoe like this. And so, if they're going to be taking what is my favorite daily trainer and the Rebel, and they make it bulkier, I might find myself moving closer to this Glycerin here. And so I actually will put this in A. I wouldn't be surprised if I make a move to it. If it ends up being, old bread and butter, what you're going to get out of it, and maybe a little lighter, hopefully in that case. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited for this. Not much of a Glycerin guy in general, but I could see myself gravitating this way.
I do not have a lot of experience with the Brooks lineup. I'm probably going to refrain from placing this shoe in a certain tier list, but it is nice to see technology being used from a shoe that takes off and seems to be doing really well in the Glycerin Max, getting pushed to other portions of the lineup. So I think that'll be really good and really interesting to see.
Yeah, I agree. I would also put this particular shoe into A tier in large part because I'm a big fan of the Glycerin 21 as kind of just like, to me, the pinnacle of the boring, classic, old school daily trainers. And with this new generation, they've kind of done something that Brooks doesn't usually do with their core lines, which is innovate to a fairly substantial degree. This new foam, the reason it's called DNA tuned, I believe, is because they alter the density of the foam from the forefoot to the kind of heel area by altering the size of the bubbles of foam. So you can actually visibly see that in the sole of something like the Glycerin Max if you look at it. But this has the effect of kind of creating a dual density kind of situation that you might get from, for example, a different shoe where they have different densities of foams, but in a much more relaxed kind of transition. So this is what helps them to create, in part, that nice rocker. So definitely excited for this shoe from a daily trainer perspective, and that's going to be our first contributor to the A tier. So, moving on, a very highly anticipated shoe of this year and early next year from Adidas. This is going to be the Evo SL. It's kind of a whole new line from Adidas. It's not something they've really necessarily targeted directly before. This is kind of the entry into their lightweight race foam in a kind of lower stack, lighter, cheaper, less engineered shoe that can be used for anything from tempo runs to daily training. So they've kind of taken some of their technology from the Evo Pro, and I guess the idea is that it's trickled down into this much more stripped down shoe that I believe is going to be coming in at a low price point of $150. Definitely low compared to some of the other shoes that contain their Light Strike Pro foam. Early reviews from people seem to be that this is a very good shoe. It hasn't really had its mass rollout yet. It's been thus far very hard to get your hands on. So for me, this shoe, given that I don't have as much experience with Light Strike Pro but have enjoyed it in the past, and that it looks to be a nice, cheap, reliable daily trainer that could also be used for some faster stuff and does not, importantly, continue necessarily in the tradition of super stack that we see with a lot of shoes coming out early next year, I'm going to put this shoe into the A category, but slightly lower over here off to the right than the Glycerin 22. Do either of you guys have any thoughts on the Evo SL?
I really like how some of the brands are making their daily trainers look very similar to the race shoes. I think it gives a cool vibe. I can imagine that if you're doing a run club and stuff, if you're showing up, you want to look nice, you can wear a shoe that looks like a very cool, fast racing shoe and do it at a fraction of the cost. I think it's really cool. When I was younger, Nike did something similar with some of their Next Percent stuff, and I got like a cheaper pair of the Next Percents and really loved wearing them. So I think it helps introduce people in a way that is not going to be so expensive, I guess, to getting the technology. I just love to see the trickle-down technology getting used, and I think it's really exciting.
Evan, I do have a quick question for you about this one. So you said a lot of this tech is going to trickle down from the Evo Pro. That's correct. And it's a Light Strike Pro foam. Does it lean more towards that springier racing foam, or have they changed the formulation there at all?
Well, it's actually somewhat controversial and not entirely known because Adidas seems to be behind the scenes iterating Light Strike Pro foam. And so, for example, people report significant differences in the Light Strike Pro found in the Adios Pro 3 versus the Evo Pro versus the new Adios Pro 4 versus what is now rumored to be the Evo Pro 2. So the one foam Light Strike Pro actually seems to encompass this kind of larger stratosphere of different foams that Adidas is using. So the Prem Strung also contains what appears again to be a slightly different form of Light Strike Pro, and they probably use multiple densities of foam in a shoe like that. For example, in the Prem Strung, because you have those multiple layers of foam. So the type of foam that is going to end up in a shoe like this is likely going to be on the more durable end and not quite as soft as something that you might expect out of, for example, the Adios Pro 4, which is rumored to have worse durability than the Adios Pro 3 just because they've kind of changed the composition of the foam to make it more springy, but as a result, it kind of loses that pop a little faster. So I guess the answer would be that it's not super well known, but that they seem to be kind of moving towards consolidating all those foams into one superior product with probably still some slight variation for different lineups based on their needs.
Sure. And, you know, I'm not much of an Adidas guy. You'll find me in New Balance usually, some sort of Saucony shoe. But the Evo Pro was awesome. And that was so unattainable, and that's what made it even cooler. And, you know, it's kind of riding a fine line here, where they're taking some of that stuff and they're putting it in a daily trainer. I mean, that's just awesome. You know, it's something I can hopefully get my hands on. You're saying it's still pretty hard to get a hold of, which is hilarious. Of course it is, just like the Evo Pro. You know, the fact that I'm even thinking about going and picking this up when I don't get Adidas shoes, I mean, that's worth something in that case. I would put this probably an S. I don't think there's anything more exciting than this shoe for a daily trainer based on what its kind of, you know, ancestry is. You know, I think that's awesome. So I would go S tier. Hopefully I'm not getting too excited about it, but it's a cool shoe nonetheless.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think probably a month ago I would have put it in S as well, but some of the preliminary reviews have come out and they're saying it's not quite as ground-shattering as they expected given the price point, and that maybe if it had come out a little bit more expensive, Adidas would have been able to put more into the build. So we'll move it up to high A tier to kind of balance out our two perspectives, and I think that's a fair placement for it. So our fourth shoe for the tier list is going to be this. This is going to be the next edition of the Cloudsurfer from On. Lakeland, you want to tell us a little bit about this shoe? I think you probably have the most experience.
I really like the Cloudsurfer. I have a pair with me now. One of the things I really like about it is that I think it just looks like a cool shoe, and it's a daily trainer. It's really done a lot, I think, for the On lineup. If you look at the shoes that they've released since this came out, they released the Cloudsurfer Trail, which is basically this shoe with, I think, some more rubber on the bottom. They probably have done something, maybe added some more reinforcements to the upper, just for trails. But they've also made their max shoe, the Cloud Eclipse, basically with a super similar geometry to what you see here. I did not like running in On Cloud shoes until I got this one, and I've really enjoyed this shoe. I think one of the things that's nicest about it is because it looks so nice, you can take it on vacation, you can wear it to dinners, and you're not going to get yelled at by your girlfriend, your mom, or your sisters for having on some crummy-looking shoes. So thank you to On for making it easy to travel with women in your life. Or men. We're a progressive channel in some ways. But I think that it really has done a lot for the lineup and them venturing out of the types of clouds that they were making before. So I'm pretty excited to see a new version of it. But I don't think it's as exciting as those other shoes. I would probably say it's a low B tier because I don't think that they're changing a lot.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think it might be called CloudTech Phase. Is that what this is called? I think they use computer simulations to figure out how it could best collapse given their kind of the density of their foam and stuff. So definitely cool to see them innovate. You can kind of see here also in this. I think this is supposed to be the Cloudsurfer Max, kind of the subsequent version of the Cloud Eclipse, and then you can see here some of their racing stuff and their training shoes. The clouds, the little holes are getting smaller and smaller. So good to see On modernizing the geometry. I think that their commercial success is going to have this kind of trickle up effect rather into their racing shoes, and I think they're going to be more of a presence in the future for those who are willing to pay the premium price point. So moving on to our next addition to this list is going to be an offering from Nike. This is the next generation of the Vomero, which is supposed to be coming out sometime early next year. In terms of relevant changes, it's still going to have probably two foams in the midsole, comprised primarily of the Zoom X you can see here on the outside, Also likely going to have some react to act both to stiffen it, but also to kind of increase durability, likely layered here near the sole, just above that rubber. And in terms of stack height, it's expected to increase. This may be one of several super stack shoes that Nike drops in 2025. And overall for this shoe, as someone who always preferred the Invincible to the Vomero, and who is now seeing the Invincible, at least for me, in the version 3, kind of lose its way a little bit, I'm excited for this shoe. If they can offer a good upper with a nice midsole, max stack, good kind of ZoomX foam in there, then I definitely think that this shoe, assuming it doesn't end up too tremendously heavy, that I think it could definitely be a good kind of long run or mid-long run shoe for a lineup.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting proposition that Nike brings to the table with the Vomero. But unfortunately for me, Nike's kind of lost the way a bit. I used to love running in their Peg 35, and after that, I think 36 was good. 37 lost me, though. It's been a while since I've had fun training in just a normal Nike daily trainer. You know, the Invincible, the first one, I thought was great, and it served its purpose really well. It's been a while since I've gotten excited for a daily trainer, and I would not see this changing that anytime soon. You know, I don't really hear people going and saying, I can't wait for the new Vomero, you know, that's finally coming out. Nike's kind of lost it a bit for me with their daily trainers. This, for me, is going to go in the C tier. You know, I really won't be looking this way. Hopefully this is the shoe that can change my mind, and maybe Nike gets back on the kind of brand that they used to be. But, you know, you're going to have to prove that before I get excited for another daily trainer again.
I'm going to agree with the C tier shoe. I think that it could be really good. I just was a D1 runner for 6 years at Nike schools. So I'm wanting to experiment with other things now. And I will try an Invincible 4. But I think outside of that, I think the Nike lineup is not really for me right now. I mean, if I need a pair of super shoes, I would get theirs on sale. I would wait for them to drop down. So I'm kind of going to pass, but say a C for me as well.
Yeah, and I think a C is fair. On paper, it sounds like it could be good. ZoomX, max stack, probably minor tweaks to what has been a pretty popular upper historically, but last few years on trainers, something about Nike just doesn't really seem to have that on-foot feel and responsiveness that we expect to be commonplace in some of these competitors. So I agree with DJ in that I think it could be great, but they're going to have to earn it first. And final shoe of this category is going to be the Brooks Hyperion 3. This is Brooks' kind of premium, more lightweight daily trainer companion to their Hyperion series, which you can see here pictured in the new generation of the Hyperion Max. This is the Hyperion Elite. So the Hyperion series is kind of like Brooks' answer to being a little bit more high-end, a little bit of a departure from maybe some of their more traditional stuff like the Glycerin, the Adrenaline, and the Ghost, which are their other main 3 lines. So for me, given that I did really enjoy the first generation of this shoe and I've heard very good things about the second, and that Brooks overall seems to be on a positive trajectory in terms of new foams, new uppers. For me, Brooks has always had by far the most comfortable uppers. So for me, I'm going to put this with the Glycerin in actually probably a little bit lower than the Glycerin, just because I think for me it would have a little bit less utility given that there are more shoes in this category. I would put this one in the same category of utility as something like the Evo SL, which would be like a steady aerobic run of probably no more than 11 or 12 miles and, you know, kind of light workout usage, but not the same daily trainer role that I would attribute to something like the Glycerin. So what about you guys? Any thoughts on the Hyperion 3?
Yeah, Evan, I do have a question for you on this one as well. First, 2 things. One, when you say the first generation of this, are you talking about the Hyperion Tempo in that case?
No, so there was the Hyperion Tempo, but then there was the Hyperion 1, 2, 3, I believe. So this should be 3. Hyperion 2 just came out with the Hyperion Max 2, but it was kind of a weird transition because the Hyperion Max 2 is kind of, the Hyperion 2 is kind of a successor more so to the Hyperion Max 1, and the Hyperion Max 2 became kind of more like their old race shoes in terms of stack height and foam quality. So it kind of left the Hyperion 3 in a weird spot where it was sort of taking on a new role. I would say personally that, to my knowledge, this will be most similar to a continuation of the Hyperion Tempo. That's kind of what you should think of, I think, in terms of a close parallel in the Brooks lineup.
Okay, and that's interesting to know because I actually ran in that today. It's a shoe that I really liked before I even got it because it looked cool, and to wear it is even better. That shoe rolls. Whatever you put in is what you're going to get out. And I think having a shoe like that's kind of like a raw experience. You know exactly how fit you are when you run in that because you're getting out of it whatever you put in. And so to hear that it's kind of going back to that, I get worried for some of these that they're getting too tall and stuff like that. You know what the trend is. And while I think maybe you can say that there are better shoes that you can go for, like a speed, I think maybe if this is starting to slim down a bit, you're starting to see it in a different category. And I chose that original Hyperion Tempo today over, an Endorphin Speed. So actually, just what you said right now, I think I was going to go lower. Maybe I will put this in the bottom of A tier because at a certain point I will run out of Hyperion Tempos, unfortunately. And if this lives up to it, then that's great. That would put it in S. And while I can't really confirm that, I'll drop the excitement a bit, and we'll keep it, in A or like high B if Lakeland kind of finds his way down there.
I really like the way this looks. I kind of want to say, is it too late to put the Glycerin into the upper B tier because it feels weird having two Brooks shoes by each other if I haven't ran in one yet. But if you guys have, so I'll take your word for it. I really like the way that the Hyperion looks, and I think it'd be a fun shoe to get started with Brooks with. So really interesting things to hear about it. I think it'd be pretty exciting.
Yeah, and in terms of comparison to the Hyperion Tempo, you can probably expect it to be a little softer, a little taller, but that's kind of to be expected. If you want something more like the Hyperion Tempo, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe the Adidas 09 would be kind of similar. The Hyperion Tempo is very, very, very firm. It does not give you a lot of support. So I would imagine the Hyperion 3 has moved in a slightly more cushioned direction. But yeah, I mean, the upper looks great. It looks like it has this kind of like race knit material, which should be very breathable. I mean, again, I think Brooks uppers are just some of my favorite in terms of comfort, breathability, not hurting my feet, fitting, size, everything. So,
and utility-wise, what would you remind me again? What you said it would be?
This would be more similar to the Evo SL.
A midweek long.
Yeah, well, I would say probably a mid-long where you're going a little faster, but you don't want the support of something max cushion or plated. Maybe you could use it as a daily trainer if you were so inclined, but probably the slightly faster stuff, like if you wanted to have a real honest tempo where you kind of had to work for it, this would be a good shoe for that. If you wanted to have like one all-round shoe that you could do light workouts in, that you could do a kind of modest long run in, and that you could do your daily training in, this would definitely be a shoe that I would think would be really good for that alongside the Evo SL. I think that's more or less the market they're targeting, and I think they also should be coming in at similar prices. So I would think that these two are going to be competing kind of with the slightly higher stack Nova Blast 5 for that spot in 2025, if I had to guess.
Mm-hmm. What shoe do you think it would kind of be a competitor with in Nike's lineup, like a Peg Turbo or Peg?
Yeah, the Peg. I would say the Peg Turbo. In fact, I was actually gonna draw that parallel. To me, the biggest difference would probably be in the foam. Maybe there's gonna be a little difference in terms of the drop. In fact, I imagine that there would be. Brooks is usually lower drop than Nike is. Nike tends to be pretty high with it, even in their lower stack shoes. And then obviously the upper. So it would probably be a matter of personal preference in terms of fit and size, which shoe you go with. But I would say of Nike's lineup, probably the Peg Turbo would be the shoe that the Hyperion 3 would compete most closely with.
Yeah,
And I think just to add on to that, Lakeland, you were talking about how it's weird having two Brooks in the A tier here. I think it kind of points to like just how awesome it is to have a brand that can just do all reliable. That's what, at the end of the day, it's just a good trainer that can get the job done is what most runners are looking for, at least in this daily training category. And of course, at the top of A tier, you have the really fancy new thing, but Brooks across the board, anyways, and that's impressive in its own right.
Yeah,
it does seem like Brooks' popularity is really doing well.
Yeah, and I think with the new foam and like the Glycerin Max, the new Glycerin 22, I think the Hyperion Max 2 was a very, very popular shoe. I see that on the feet of a lot of people when I'm running and at races and stuff. So the only thing Brooks has yet to do, you were just alluding how people want that reliability when it comes to the daily trainer, but in terms of their race shoe, Brooks has been pretty severely lacking. I think Josh Kerr is the only one who speaks positively of the Hyperion Elite 3. So in terms of that, this new shoe, they say that they have a whole new foam, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in the Super Shoe edition of the tier list, but it should have a completely new design geometry. You can see there's kind of a cutout in a strange, almost bubble shape here in order to kind of save on weight. It's a new foam, probably a new plate geometry. So I'm sure it has a redesigned upper. The old upper was kind of bad as well. So I think that race shoe is something that Brooks is going to be taking a lot more seriously in 2025 as well. And so that is something I'm pretty excited for in their Hyperion lineup. All right, well, I think that just about covers it for the daily trainers, unless anyone has anything to add.
Good. I think this is a solid list. There's a lot of diversity. Nothing that completely blew our minds in an S tier at the end of the day. But again, it's daily trainers. You don't need it to be something insane that'll blow your mind. You just want it to get the job done. So anything in A tier, even B tier, it'll probably get the job done. And I think a lot of it comes down to personal preference and kind of anticipation for what the shoe either is now or will become. So overall, I think we got a good list going on here.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to get excited about super shoes. And with daily trainers, I think if you're at an A tier, you're doing phenomenal because you're working with a lower price point, and it's hard to get people excited about that sort of thing sometimes. But I think some of these shoes are really going to be a great offering for these brands. So.
Yeah, so I think that just about wraps it up, and stay tuned for our next edition of the tier list, where we're going to be covering shoes such as the new Cloudsurfer Max, the Brooks Hyperion Max 2, this new offering, the Pegasus Premium, I think it's going to be called, the new Cloud Monster. So all kinds of stuff, specifically in the Max cushion shoe category, and then we're going to be doing race shoes and all the way down the line. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Lakeland, you want to sign us off?
Yeah, like and subscribe so you can see the next one. Thank you guys for watching. Take care. Peace, love, positivity.